All right, we're live. Happy Friday, another week of the Legal Friday. I couldn't think of a name for this, so I just started saying, you know what? It's a panel. It's every week. It's Legal Friday. I do it every Friday. What am I going to do? So it's Legal Friday. How are you guys doing?
Well, yesterday was technically the end of the week. It's a holiday. All the courts are closed.
Oh, yeah.
True. Happy Veterans Day to Steve and any other fellow veterans.
We're all veterans in our own way.
I never know. I mean, it's one of those, Steve. Well, Steve, do you live near Fort Bragg area or?
Yeah, about 60 miles north of it.
Okay, so you're used to having a ton of people related to the military one way or another. I live in Hampton Roads, which has quite literally every branch of service in the area, including not one, but I think 3 naval stations. We have the Marines, we have the Army, we even have the Coast Guard presence and everything. So it's like I see military everywhere I go all the time. But then if I travel anywhere in the country, soldiers are rare. Have you guys noticed that?
We have a national air base by us that accommodates all 4 branches plus the Michigan National Guard and all that. And so there's a lot of soldiers around me, and we see them driving around and stuff, but you don't really see them out in other parts of the country. So, but my dad's a veteran. I know Valhalla's a veteran. We were going to do a stream together maybe tomorrow about that. It's one of the greatest honors to be a veteran, I think. And I kind of missed my chance. I was going to go into the Corps. I kind of regret that I didn't in some ways, but anyways, there's no other duty. And Flux, of course, in the chat. She's a veteran.
You mentioned seeing them driving around and stuff. I will say that is not one of the high points of living in a heavily military area, because a lot of GIs, I'll just say GIs because it could be anybody, they tend to buy their first car and get their driver's license at the same time. And they have a lot of testosterone. So that is one of the drawbacks of living in a very heavy military area.
Right.
But all right, so let's go into the cases of the week, or what we are going to do. Steve, you wanted to talk about taking care of Maya, and you also sent me this article about the reptile theory. And I think, Steve Gosney, you also have thoughts on taking care of Maya. I'm sure everybody does. So, Southern Law, Steve, take it away.
Okay, well, I'll start. And of course, I had told Eric earlier, I hope Steve would pop in because he knows more of this law than I do. But, some of the questions I saw, of course, with the big verdict for the plaintiffs is when do they get the money? Do they get the money? Is it appealed? Are there limits on it? And punitive damages caps and things like that. And so there's maybe some things there to talk about. What you had just put on the screen, Eric, was an article from a law firm talking about the reptile theory of litigation, which is doing what you can to make the defendant look so bad that you have kind of a core brain level negative reaction to the defendant, which helps amp up your compensatory damages. And I think the plaintiff's lawyer here, when I watched the case, I didn't see all of it. I thought he picked up speed as he went along in the case and was helped a lot by the defense witnesses who were pegging the scale on smugness and arrogance. And by the end of it, from what I saw, I thought this is just about how much money do they get at this point. They look like they're out of control, think they're better than everybody else. And the plaintiff's lawyer remained kind of understated throughout of it and had some good quips and things. And boy, did they end up delivering. So I think, and I'll hand it over to Steve after this, I think there would be probably a motion to ask the judge to remit the damages awards down on the compensatory side, because you can make a motion like that. I don't know that this judge will do it. And then it'll be off to the appellate side and whether and when, if they settle or eventually have to stroke an increased amount of judgment eventually. What do you think, Steve?
Well, I'm a criminal trial lawyer, and this is civil. I did do civil about 20 years ago for 6 years and used to know this stuff. But to speak out of turn, I'd hate to add too much. I will share a story that I had. I know we had a products liability case that was just horrific facts, and we represented the widow of the person that was killed by the product liability in our firm. And I will never forget. There was two companies. It was a subrogation claim. So there was a part manufacturer, and there was a larger. I can't get too much into it, but there was a larger equipment, and this part failed. So we sued both of them, and it's hard for me to talk about it without choking up. But we were settling it, talking about it, and the arrogant subcontractor was like, "We'll give you $10,000." Just arrogant, like, we'll get out of here like this. And, that we were so far off. We were like $1 million, right? And I'll never forget the lawyer for the defense for the company was so respectful and so kind. And we were in a mediation, and he didn't need to do this, but this was the lead trial attorney for the defense. And we had our widow sit there. And he says, "This may not mean anything." See, I'm getting choked up, but we are here to resolve this. We are terribly moved by your loss, and our intent, every bit of our intent, is to resolve this. And I want you to know that personally, we are moved, and we feel and now it's just we're going to resolve it. We are going to do our best to do that, and we ended up doing it. And also selling our subrogation claim against the parts manufacturer to them for the settlement amount, right? Which was great, and it made our client whole, and our client was satisfied. I mean, and that set the tone, and it was so wonderful. And my whole question on this Maya case is, why do these arrogant SOB attorneys on the defense side not just admit liability and come at it with a lot more hat in hand? And say, we've terminated these employees, we've set these policies in place, we do good things otherwise, and this is a terrible tragedy, and come at it with humility rather than arrogance, because the arrogance is what got punished.
So I have a thought, because it establishes sort of a slippery slope. If they come at it, then all of a sudden they have everyone coming out of the woodwork. I think that is one of their major concerns. I represent both plaintiffs and defendants in a lot of civil suits. And as you can put as many zeros behind the damages as you want to make it interesting to you. But the bottom line is that if somebody thinks, in fact, I have an employer who got sued for wrongful employment termination. Well, now every time they hiccup when they terminate somebody, there's a threat of a lawsuit, or there's another lawsuit filed, because it sort of perpetuates that that situation, right? So one leads to the other, leads to the other, and so they figure if they can stop this and show, like, listen, you can spend tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on a lawsuit and you won't win. That's a risk that they might be willing to take, because I deal with that with a lot of my defense cases. So there is some justification for doing what they did. That being said, is there a civil cap? Because that's what I was asking. Is this automatically reduced down at all?
Oh, on the punitive side, my research showed that they did have a cap, but that the Supreme Court of Florida had struck that as actually they had it on non-economic damages, a cap there, but the punitive damages cap is 3x the compensatory damages. So I don't think they awarded higher. I think they awarded much lower than that on the punitive damages side. And the old cap for non-economic damages, pain and suffering and stuff, they had struck that. So I don't see necessarily an impediment to the award, other than if the trial judge thinks it should be remitted, which they have some discretion to do, and then that can be argued, or they go up to the Court of Appeals and say, well, this was an excessive amount for this event or that event. And if you lose that, boy, you've got a big check to cut.
I was just going to mention, having done civil law for 20 years, have my own firm in California. I see completely counter to what you guys are saying. I not to be kind of callous, but I would have fought this tooth and nail. And primarily, I would never stipulate to liability based upon the causation issue. I mean, it is a long. I think Steve is exactly right. I think that the plaintiff's lawyer did a great job of doing emotion, playing on juror sympathy. But it's a major leap, even with the suicide note, to be able to say that because of horrible treatment, we can stipulate to that, we have a mother committing suicide. There had to be other issues. And, under Florida law, I researched it, there has to be a direct causal link to the suicide.
I hate to do it. Please stop using that word on YouTube. Just trust me on this.
It's self-unaliving.
Yes, it's self-deletion or unalive. Don't say that word because it will get this demonetized and behind an adults only paywall. I'm not kidding.
The word that I used, S?
Yes.
Yeah, the S.
Oh,
yes.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
But anyway, yeah, so I would have fought that tooth and nail. While, I did research some Florida punitive damage verdicts, and, we got $1.5 billion against corporations. So I think the plaintiff's lawyer was doing a great job of making sure that the punitive damage award was substantially less than the compensatory damages award. I think they will appeal this to the end of time. I've done this time and time again with the big LA law firms. They will stop at nothing. I don't care if they lose on appeal. They're going to continue to fight to not have this award. So I envision in the next, 2 to 3 years, this settling for a much lesser sum than what we've heard about. Having looked at all the comments on TikTok and on the various social media platforms, I think the verdict amount got the headlines. I think finally justice. I think the Netflix special helped there also. I do think plaintiffs' counsel did a great job. I just think that we're never going to, people are never going to know at the end of the day that it was much less of a award and issue than it was represented to be.
Well, and then this is going to go really quiet too, because we all remember the hot coffee McDonald's case.
Yeah.
And, it was whatever millions of dollars it was. And then it went through the appeals, and then there was remitters, and then there were some editors. And at the end of the day, she got, something like 120,000 or something, or not even maybe that much. But you didn't hear about all that. So this case is going to kind of go away unless we keep talking about it.
Didn't they, from what I understand, she didn't even get enough to cover the medical bills that she suffered.
I don't think she got enough to cover the medical bills that she suffered. No.
I don't think so either, ultimately.
Yeah, at the end of the day. But you don't hear about that. You just see the headline thing. But that, of course, is pre-internet, pre-YouTube. And if people keep following this and presenting it, then you'll get the whole story. And, part of what I like to do is inform people as to how these things really work. So it should still go.
Yeah, good idea. Good idea. Let me see. What's the next case? MLS.
Can I jump up on this one?
Yeah.
Because I watched a lot. Megan Fox did a lot of coverage of this, and she did a really good job. And watched, I think, the whole thing. I was jumping in and out, right? However, at the end, when I was talking with her and discussing it, it was an interesting observation to see the outrage towards the institutions that we used to hold in high regard, such as the medical profession, hospitals, children's hospitals of all things. And you saw the defense playing to that at the punitive damage award when they were saying, we look at all this good work we do and all that. But I would say that in the last, 5 years or so, most all institutions have completely shredded their credibility, and people are openly hostile to large institutions and the authoritarianism and the arrogance that they tend to condescend against the people, namely the shutdowns that were caused by things through the
I was going to say the past 3 years, especially, I can see where it's
so. And I think that, therefore, when they come there and they say, look at all this good work we do and look how wonderful we are, and they try to play the white hat, I think that, it's kind of across the board that this country and the populace and the jurors are in a position of distrust and anger against their institutions. And this is the cost of destroying our institutions one by one.
I can't disagree with you. It's
an interesting concept. In order to do, at least in Michigan, in order to do medical malpractice of some sort, you have to have an expert in the field that essentially signs an affidavit before you even file the complaint, because it needs to be certified with the complaint. So that means that you have doctors that are in the industry that are prepared to file affidavits against other doctors in the industry. And there's a whole network, nationwide network. I knew a doctor that was part of this network, and he would travel around the country and do all these investigations and sue. So once he retired as a doctor, his business was literally helping others sue doctors. It's a whole kind of racket, really.
Well, So let's go on to cringe subject. I think.
Ooh, I love cringe.
All right. Well, good, Ian. I'm going
The
to have
internet
you
is
kick
built
off
on
on it.
cringe.
See if you have any thoughts on this sexy,
Oh yeah.
Oh
sexy
God.
guy.
Why did you do that? Oh, dude,
Okay.
that is sick.
We confirmed that that's him.
I think it is him. I'm not going to, stake my life on something like that, but there's a little bit going on in that case.
Mhm.
Not only is apparently he likes to show off, but Laura Loomer has got her teeth sunk into this and is going after, I guess, the whole judge's family has been tweeting up a storm, smearing Trump, things like that.
Mhm.
And I'm curious, what does this all mean? I mean, obviously, well, not obviously, in my opinion, Trump is trying to do the Chicago 7 defense right now. And, hitting at the judge, trying to piss him off as much as possible and challenging him. Like, yeah, go ahead, lock me up, bitch. Do it. I mean, seriously, that kind of thing. And he does have a reason to come out that stridently. There is strategy there. Like, okay, judge, you're going to put him in contempt of court. What are you going to do with a jail that has to be emptied and filled with Secret Service? Good luck. Good luck. And this is all because of your ego. But Ian, I know you're covering this. We talked about it a little bit more. Do you have any thoughts? And I know everybody else has to.
Yeah, there's so many thoughts, especially when you throw a horrible picture like you just showed on that screen. And I just checked Twitter, and it popped up on Twitter, so we're scared. Listen, there's so many issues. One thing right now they're questioning is whether Laura Loomer is allowed, if there's illegality in her choice of either attacking or harassing the judge's members. To be honest, like before I get in, I was going to do some research on it because I don't know New York law on that. So if someone has more information on that, it'd be great. The other thing what really struck me, though, is I did some research, and I do not believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that Donald Trump ever made a motion to disqualify or recuse the judge, which was, I think, a major procedural error. Because right now, I don't know where they go with this, biased defense. Generally, according to New York law, I'm a California lawyer, but I did the research. You file that motion, and then you have an interlocutory appeal going when it's denied. I'm sure it would be denied, and that would be going concurrently with this action. And I think that would be a huge basis for overturning the motion for summary judgment, any damage determination. So I'm a little, as usual, confused by Donald Trump's attorneys in this situation. I don't know if the guys have any other suggestions about what he was doing or not doing.
They got a summary judgment motion. Was that granted?
That was granted.
When was that
It
granted?
determined fraud. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, obviously, you would want to file that motion beforehand. There is some strategy to waiting and sort of letting the chips sort of stack up against the judge and then hitting it real quick because one chip's not going to be enough, two might not be. Let them stack up a bit. And maybe they thought, it could be just we don't think this is going to get granted on the summary, so let's hold back and see if we can't get a few more chips stacked up. It's the practice of law. It's all about strategy. I always tell my clients, I'm like, listen, I'm only one person. I can't control the thoughts and who, what you say, let alone the other side, the judge's clerks, and so you're just kind of guessing and hoping in a lot of these things.
I see that as kind of a small, one person practice or a small law firm. But, from what I understand, Donald Trump has endless resources when it comes to legal counsel. So it seems like this is a major issue. It could go into the malpractice area.
Well, it goes back to the idea like this could have been done through a jury demand, but they never did the jury demand time.
Agreed. You're right.
And that's this. But this is also kind of an issue with Trump that he has a really bad habit of, so far, the attorneys he's been using at various times sucking pretty decently. And I just,
Sean, does he have the right to a jury? Because you brought that up.
He did. You had to wait at the beginning of this under New York law. I mean, there were, as much as I detest law Twitter at times, the New York attorneys that are on there said you literally, it's a one-page debate. You just file, say, I want a jury. Boom, you have a jury.
I just thought
They never
because of the
did.
type of law or the type of case that was being brought, he didn't have the right to a jury. And I'm mistaken. That's fine.
Yeah, well,
That's what I
the New York attorneys, and from what I was reading, it sounds like they did have the right to it. So
Okay, so that's another. Yeah, but I agree with you, Sean, that sometimes he doesn't make the best of choices in general of the people that he associates
yeah.
and hires.
So
it's
yeah, the
interesting.
next question though is, is Laura Loomer attacking the members of the judge's staff? Is that a separate crime / some sort of civil wrong by doing that? And I gotta do more research on that because I'd like to figure that out. I don't know what the situation is. On one hand, I say it's absolute freedom of speech. If they're online like we all are, you have the freedom to look into Ian Corzine's history and attack me. I mean, I hope, please don't do it, but you have the right to. On the other hand, maybe there's some sort of specific rule with judges, staff, and family members. I don't know.
Well, I don't think it's so much that. I think it's more so this is the attorney attacking the judge. And so when you are an attorney.
No, Laura
practicing in
Loomer is
front-
a reporter. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Never
Yeah,
mind.
yeah.
All right. Never mind. Then I have nothing to say.
Well,
I
but
think
one
it
of
would be in-
Trump's attorneys has filed a complaint that just came in on the judge.
Well, that was a representative, right? You're talking about Elise?
I guess so. I'm confused.
Yeah, Elise Stefanik. She's a rep. She just filed it. I think it's because Donald Trump's attorney screwed up. She's filing a complaint with the New York State Commission on Judicial Conduct. And she's basically putting all the allegations you would put in if you were making a motion to recuse or disqualify. So I don't know if that's going to go anywhere. It's supposed to start an investigation. I still don't know how that impacts the outcome of the case. But she put it on Twitter
the
today.
reporter that you mentioned, who does she work for? Is she independent? She work for.
Laura Loomer, yeah, she's very independent.
Yeah.
Well said, Eric.
Interesting
Yeah, yeah.
trend. That's an interesting trend that I'm seeing. We talked about that that small mom and pop newspaper that was raided by the police and shut down a couple of months ago. We have Turtle Boy being arrested and charged with witness intimidation on the Karen Reed case. We have this woman apparently being threatened with something, or at least accused of potentially violating a law, all because they're speaking out against the process.
Well, and there's all the Trump lawyers who are being threatened by their bar and by disbarment and being prosecuted for criminal things, saying because you represent somebody and you are wrong in your advice, all of a sudden you're a criminal and you're a co-conspirator. And this is basically, I mean, I think everybody here needs to keep clearly in mind that this is not a legal process, that our institutions, including the justice system, has been weaponized against the people. And that goes top to bottom, just like I don't know if you heard about the guy who posted, for all Democrats vote on Wednesday rather than Tuesday. Ha ha ha.
And he's going to prison for 7 months.
Ricky
Right.
Vaughn.
And then the Democrat that does the same thing doesn't even get looked at. So, I mean, we have a two-tiered, this unequal protection of law, two-tiered criminal justice system, and the system has been weaponized not only against Trump, but against people that help Trump, people that pay Trump, support Trump, commentate in favor of Trump, and individual voters who might go out and protest against. So it's basically anybody who is in opposition to the insiders in the department. So to cover this and say this is some sort of legal process and we're going to create legal analysis, I think we need to. We can do that for entertainment purposes, but I don't believe that that's what's going on here. I think that we have a corrupted system, and it's a major problem. It's a much larger problem than Trump. It's a much larger problem. It's an institutional failure on the part of our country and our people. And I don't really know the way out. I'm just pointing out that we need the first thing to combat tyranny is to speak truth to power and to not buy into the lie. And to think that there's a fair trial going up there, I think that's a lie. So,
There is a way out, though, because early in in our history, we were doing that, and the first impeachment was of a Supreme Court justice for just that reason. So the way out is we need to start impeaching judges.
Except that this is the problem here is we have what's called the Cloward Piven strategy, which is that the country is basically under assault from all quarters in all things. They're pressing top to bottom on every institution, and it's overwhelming any individual's ability to fight back. And basically, it is that you have a group that is basically obsessed with power and is no longer supports the Constitution of the United States and fair process and free speech and right to bear arms and none of these things. That the idea of America is under assault, and we need to. I mean, one of the reasons I write is because we need to train our children. We need to teach through our schools. The institutions need to train the next generations to appreciate what we have had or maybe had, I don't know, in our country about the value of the rule of law. Because once you lose it, it's very hard, very bloody, very difficult to get back and to recover that which is lost.
Okay. By the way, this super chat came in claiming that the judge said even if they requested a jury, he would not grant it. It is strictly a bench trial by statute. And this judge is very clear about his thoughts on juries.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I think this judge is, he's opening himself up to a lot of appealable issues. So, I mean, if he wants to say all this stuff, I mean, good for him. But I mean, his overall actions, I think, I've been very surprised by.
And here's the problem with what Steve said. Well, first of all, they need to impeach the judges. What Corzine said, I should clarify. Yeah. But the other avenue, which is a much darker avenue, is that when the Republicans or conservatives or whoever you want to identify yourself as get into power, that they then weaponize the system in retaliation. And that's a problem. I don't want to see us go down that road. And but that's why you see a lot of it's only on one side, it's not on the other. Because a lot of conservatives are not willing to weaponize the system.
That's kind of what I'm talking about the institutions have been corrupted. I think at this, there has to be retaliation. Because if there isn't, and I'm not saying I'm an R, I'm saying that it's institutional elites, big media, big corporations, big government, big academia against individual freedom. And most of the good people in the country, the flyover country, the people who are just working and raising their kids and trying to live in freedom and have a home and want to get ahead, everybody in America like that, as opposed to somebody who lives in DC or LA and wants to control, Disney. They're going to run the great company of Disney that I loved as a kid. It's right down the street from us, right? And here they inject so much ideology, Marxist ideology, into that it's destroying the company. But there's no stockholder check on the destruction of that company. And they keep putting out movies that are infused with propaganda rather than playing to the children of America where they could make a lot of money. So the monetary incentive is no longer even in the system. And the people that speak against the system and try to call this out are silenced and shut down by these big tech companies. So
speaking of Disney, just because you brought it up, I think they might be starting to see the light with that a little bit.
They are. They are.
A little bit. They're like shutting down and revamping their approach to a lot of these.
Some of it's ironic, though. Like they've paused Snow White, delayed the release a full year, realized that dwarves are a fundamental part of the story, but then they can't go far enough and actually cast dwarves, so they're going to use CGI replacements. So little people still out jobs. Tough luck. Sad to be them. But by the way, I have another picture for you, Ian, since you enjoyed the last.
Oh, man. Come on,
man. Got a rogues gallery, man. These people are so weird.
Viva's coming out with this next.
I just want to follow up on what Steve and everyone was just talking about with respect to the incentive. This is an interesting thing that I noticed when we talk frequently about cancel culture, and I'm a very big believer in the genius of capitalism, because I think capitalism is an effective form of implementing democracy into our society through our spending dollars. Our spending dollars, basically, we vote with our spending dollars. You buy that which you like, that which you respect, that which you care about, that which something that is beneficial to you. That's what you're going to buy. It's a reflection of the public's will, capitalism. And I think what we've seen happen with our government, and it seems, so you could say, like, everything. Why is Disney doing what they're doing? Why is everyone doing what they're doing when that's not what the public wants? It seems to be it's flying in the face of what capitalism has basically represented for the last 2.5 centuries. And I think the answer to that is our government has tilted the scales with respect to capitalism by creating these ESG programs, these DEI programs, where they're leaning very hard on the scale and giving financial incentives to these companies for them to spew out narratives that are not consistent with what a typical American family's values are, or necessarily, and thereby enable them to ignore the typical capitalism, and say, oh, instead of us getting our money from the public, we'll get it in funding from grants, we'll get it in this way or in that way, which has nothing to do with the implied democratic principles that undergird capitalism.
Well,
so that's what I think we've seen over the last decade or so, ever since 2008 when it first came along. That's what we've been seeing.
I was hoping that with Trump, one of the things that, I mean, he surprised me on how much he did that when he was president that I agreed with. I didn't expect that. But one of the things I was hoping for that he did not do was bring back kind of the Teddy Roosevelt trust busting era. And now, like, I see that the National Association of Realtors and the Realtors Association just got a big antitrust judgment against them for certain real estate companies for colluding to price fix supposedly real estate commissions. Well, those are just little guys. Those are little real estate agents making their money, trying to do their thing, and they're getting hit with big fines. And then there's real antitrust going on, and the Department of Justice is asleep at the switch because they're going after the little guys. It's like, the antitrust division really needs to be reinvigorated. And I would like to see, maybe we could get back to that soon, because monopoly is a problem. Capitalism, what you're saying, which is the Marxist critique, it's really free markets. But free markets do result in monopoly over time. And we need to have a vigorous and fairly enforced anti-monopoly regime through the federal government, but they're not doing that.
I got to give pushback a little bit on that, because there is some antitrust action happening right now. They're going after Google. They're going after Amazon. The person they have in there, even Barnes has stated, is really top notch in terms of the antitrust phenomenon.
It's always tomorrow. It's always tomorrow, which is the typical.
Well, they're in court now.
Oh, it's coming. It's coming.
They're doing it now, dude.
Big action's coming. I don't believe anything. I have lost faith in any of these institutions.
Okay, but they're doing it now. I mean, they are in court now, suing Google now. So
we'll see.
I don't know.
But the censorship regime is so out of control.
I totally agree with that. That's like a separate discussion. But as far as the monopoly aspect of it, they're going after them. And even Apple is getting hit hard because of EU, things of that sort.
It's the effect on the ground to the censorship regime by these big media companies. Does anybody see that? Is it getting worse or is it getting better?
Well, these are two different arguments.
That's a monopolistic behavior. If you can have companies that shut down one side of the debate, that is a monopolistic thing. I think I really think we need to go to a utility model, that these big companies, these big tech companies, are utilities to be regulated. Because if they can shut me down from what I'm saying and speaking the truth the way I feel it, right? If they can stop me from doing that by cutting me off and censoring me, can they shut down my water? Can they shut down my phone? Can they shut down my electricity? How far does this go?
It happened to me this week, actually. I was in court when for 2 days of the Trump trial in New York with Judge Engoron in a viewing room, and on the first day I was just taking handwritten notes. The second day I was live tweeting, and I was like, you know what, I'll use my live tweets as my own notes and just sort of and I was live tweeting. I was actually sitting next to Matthew Lee of Inner City Press, who was live tweeting. And you might say, if he's live tweeting it, why are you live tweeting it? And that's a really great question, unless you actually sit in court. Because when you sit in court and you're watching him live tweeting and you're hearing the questions and the back and forth, what you realize is no human, and he does a phenomenal job. I highly recommend that you check out that if you're on Twitter, you sign up to Inner City Press if you enjoy watching the back and forth exchange that happens on Twitter. No human can take down everything. Maybe, I don't know, maybe someone who's trained like a stenographer to get down stuff quickly. There's so many questions that happen. So in the course of a half hour, you'll see 6, 7, 8 tweets, perhaps, if he's working very fast. And that will capture 12 questions maximum. And during that time, there's 45 questions. He's trying to get down the essence of it. And he will get down a great amount of it, far better than there not being anyone there. But if there were 3 people doing it, you wouldn't get everything. So that's why he's giving his perspective and focusing on the back and forth that he understands. And sometimes I'll mishear something, or he might mishear something. I was like, you know what? I'm going to start live tweeting this. So I was live tweeting it. I was interested in seeing how my live tweet of the same time, this overlap in topic, but totally different questions and answers back and forth that we ended up fixating on. Well, when I got there, like a half hour after I got there, the reason I brought this up now is when I got there, like a half hour after I got there, someone came over to me and they're like, you have to put away your electronics. So we had a whole back and forth, and I was like, I'm an attorney. I use electronics in court all the time. And there's a rule against recording, so no one can have electronics here. I said, I'm an officer of the court. So they were like, so I had a whole dialogue with them outside the hall, and they were like, okay, fine. Since you're an officer of the court, you can do it. When I came back after lunch, so another guy was like, you can't do that. And I told him the same thing. And he's like, no, you can't do it. So I went to a different viewing room. I was like, I'm not going to fight this guy. I want to watch a trial. I went to a different viewing room, and they threw me out of there, and they said, you can't live tweet from here. And I was like, why can't I live tweet from here? And I ended up talking to like this guy from like the staff there who oversees the police. And he's like, yeah, the media are allowed to bring the electronics in there. Attorneys can't. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm an officer of the court. Who's the media? They're like, well, I was like, I haven't broken any rules. No one thinks I've broken any rules. I was like, why can I not bring electronics in there? They're like, well, the judge is concerned that someone's going to record something, which that concern alone is ridiculous. I mean, that's so unconstitutional and insane that it's like he's afraid of someone recording a trial. We used to have, it's like public is supposed to be able to attend and know anything that's happening there. But putting that aside, even he makes the rules of his court so he can get away with it, I guess, if it's, constitutional. But I was like, why can I not bring electronics in there? You trust the media to follow the rules of a court inside a courtroom more than you trust an officer of the court to follow the rules of the court inside the courtroom. This is out. So I said, I need to talk to like your boss here. And they wouldn't even let me talk to them. All the Capitol Police, they all affirm attorneys who are officers of the courts are less trustworthy to actually follow the rules of the court inside a courtroom than some stupid hack media schmuck and it's all, to me, it's all about they want to control the narrative. The media, they can feel fairly confident that most of the media there is going to be spewing the narrative they want, that Trump, the orange man bad, and all these, he's fraud and evil and whatever Letitia James nonsense wants to spew out there. And they have a much tougher control over it, much firmer control over it if they require you to have a media pass. I mean, I spent last night signing up to get a media pass and trying to establish that I am a journalist under city credentials, but that's a 30-day process. I'm not gonna be able to get in there.
You should talk to somebody like Matthew from Inner City and just say, hey, can I be a stringer? See if maybe you can pick up media credentials.
I think the individual has to do it.
But who is the government or the court to be blessing who is media and who is not? The last I heard, America was a free speech zone. And so, the fact that you have to get a credential to say that I can speak because I got my piece of paper from the government, what the piece of paper is called the U.S. Constitution, the First Amendment.
Yeah, and, that's why I mean a media pass.
Like this idea that you can be blessed. And back to Eric's point, I'm going to push back on the pushback. And that is, you said that the DOJ is prosecuting all that. But see what he has when they control both sides of the table. It's like the whole Hunter Biden thing. It's like, well, you're going to plead to a misdemeanor, and it's going to prevent you from prosecuting anything else. So now the defense and the judge and the prosecutor are all in on the deal. And we get that a lot. The DOJ is doing these things called consent agreements, whereas you get a friendly party on either side and they get into litigation, and then they get the court's blessing to enforce something that they agree to as insiders, and then the court enforces it against everybody. They do that in cities like segregation and busing and this sort of thing, and it's expanding now. This idea is expanding. So I don't trust that they are adversarial parties on either side of that table.
I think that we may be talking past each other, because I didn't say Justice Department, it's the FTC. Okay.
Well, it's the federal government. That's the government. You think the FTC is independent and unbiased and isn't loaded with?
No, I'm saying they're going after
insiders?
Google right now. They're in court right now. Ian,
If
this
they
is
come up
your
with a
area. I
settlement,
mean, are they in court or not?
It's settle, and then it's
because
like,
Steve,
oh, look, we resolved everything.
But Steve, it almost is saying, you're saying there's a problem. Then we're like, well, they're doing it. So what? Like, if they did nothing with it, would that be good? It's like you've kind of made it unwinnable situation. If they do something, it's bad. If they don't do something, it's bad. It's like, what should they do? Nothing.
Observing that the media, the crackdown on the people, is ongoing and getting worse, and that all of these things that we're told, don't worry, it's being taken care of, is a lie.
I didn't say that. I said two things can be true at once. They can be going after those companies, and people can be suppressed. Two things can be true at the same time.
Okay.
And they are going, well, they are going after Google as an example on antitrust front, because you spoke about antitrust, very specifically going after them for selling their products, things like that, tweaking the search results. Rumble is getting a lot of headway in their case too, and that may have a factor. I don't think these are going to affect everything overnight.
I think it's three things. I think you're correct in everything you're saying here. I think it's more than three. I think it's more than two things. Because the third thing is, in those branches which are going after it, there are strong forces which are fighting them going after it. They're working hard against it. So there's really three things. There is the corruption that Steve's talking about. There is a fight that's happening from some people who care about American values, who are trying to stop that. But then within their own, these big agencies, there's those who are supporting that whole type of control the narrative, cancel culture. We saw this in the big tech Senate committee hearings, where you have, when they bring out Mark Zuckerberg and they bring out Jack Dorsey from his cave and being a hermit, and they come out there in front of them, and you have the right is, most of the Republicans are basically screaming that if you don't give us free speech, we're going to take away Section 230. And you have people on the left like Senator Hirono rambling like a crazy person about how they need to censor far more people. So that's why. So in that situation, the Senate itself is acting in those two completely opposite ways in how they try and address what the better way of handling this.
Well, it's also a joke too, because they bring him out front and it's a little dog and pony show. We yell at Jack Dorsey, then he goes back to his ashram or whatever when he's done, and nothing ever happens. And I think that's Steve's complaint, and that's a completely legitimate complaint.
Right.
I'm tired of how many times has Ted Cruz burn Zuckerberg or blah blah blah. It's blast him, shreds him, tears him, which is like, no, they go in there, you yell at them for a minute, whatever, and then they walk out and say, okay, see you in 6 months. It's like that old, what was it, the Looney Tunes cartoon where you had the hunter and where they like checked in at the end of the day. I forgot what it was, like the hunter and the prey. It feels sort of like that.
I just feel sometimes we can't be the two minds about this thing, right? It's either we're for, like, we were just talking about being pro-capitalist and free markets, and now we're talking about we want private businesses to be on our whim and to give us free speech, but it's not for private businesses to give you free speech. That's the government's issue. But then it's like, oh well, if we don't like what they're not letting us say, it's
But Nate,
I like to hold on. Just let me finish. I like to be just consistent in what I'm saying. YouTube, Google, all these people are free. They're capitalists and they're doing it. If I go to their platforms and say something that they don't like and they say, I just don't want you to say it, and kick you off, will I be unhappy about it? Will I tell people they shouldn't spend their dollars there? Yes, that's capitalism. But for me to then advocate for the government to force them to let me say what I want to say, I think it's antithetical to the points that we're trying to make. And I think even in sometimes these conflicts and stuff, on one end, like Ben Shapiro, he's out there talking about people to be censored for being pro-Palestine, but then he's one of the biggest free speech advocates out there. So I fear that saying that free speech dies to a thunderous clap of applause, because it sounds like it's more we want to hear what we like to hear. It's not really about the principle of letting people say what they want to say.
And I'll respectfully push back on that, Nate, by telling you that put aside the whole Ben Shapiro thing. That's sort of a. I understand why you made the point. But that's really a little bit different from. We can address that as well. But I really want to fixate more about when you're saying that we're standing for free speech, but then we want government or freedom of capitalism, but we want government to intercede and claim antitrust anytime that big companies are doing things we don't like. The reason that they should be interceding is because they already interceded in a way to motivate these companies to act in opposite to free speech, in opposite towards a capitalist perspective, in opposite to what the will of the people is, i.e., for free speech, by giving them various motivations through ESG, through DEI, to basically say, hey, we will financially reward you, much as we financially rewarded people 60 years ago to get married by giving them tax breaks. We will financially reward you if you hire people who are of different intersectionalities, if you promote agendas that are consistent with what a tiny fraction of the American people or a relatively small fraction of the American people are actually interested in. So they've interceded in a way to motivate these companies financially to actually act inconsistent with what typical American values are. So when we're screaming that government should intercede and stop these companies from doing that because it's inconsistent with what American values are, it's a matter of saying we need you to intercede because you screwed this pooch already, and now you're the only person who can fix you're the only entity that can fix it. So it's not inconsistent, Nate. Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, I see the point you're trying to make. Right? If the government is out there funding something in private business, then they should be beholden to those funds. Those funds come with consequences. Those consequences that you have to follow the Constitution, right? I do agree with that. But I don't agree with the fact, like, for instance, when we talk about free speech, I don't like, and I know this always gets people angry. I don't believe YouTube owes you free speech. Now, if you're saying the government is paying YouTube to do certain things, then that's the reason why. That's another argument. But I don't believe YouTube owes you free speech. I don't think Google owes you free speech. I think if you go out there to a park or a public park and you want to speak, that's the place where your free speech is guaranteed. So I think that's the point that I want to make. Now I know that makes people always angry. No, they should follow the Constitution. Hey, it's the government, and all of us here as lawyers, it's the government that has to follow those principles of the Constitution.
So you're not following the Missouri's case in which the government was actively colluding with big tech to censor conservatives, right? You're not following that?
Yeah, of course. What I'm saying is, one instance doesn't mean the principle should. Again, I don't believe YouTube. I don't believe Rumble.
I don't think that was one instance. That was systematic on the part of many people in the federal government to actively influence the many tech companies over a long period of time to influence the narrative. The fact is that our big tech, big companies, big media is actively colluding with big government.
If the government is actively suppressing someone's free speech, that is unconstitutional. If a private company is saying, I don't want you saying this, just because I just don't want it to get to the point where we're on a Christian website, you have to have atheists or Satanists go up there and say, hey, we hate Jesus, blah, 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 blah. And then they'll be forced to have that type of speech up there because they'll be seen as having to provide the First Amendment protection. Sort of like I don't believe that the baker writing a baker, like having a baker having to force them to, like what's going on in Virginia now, the baker being forced to make a cake for a gay couple. I don't believe that's right either. And the argument was, because they're getting subsidies from the government, they should be forced to bake the cake. No, that's wrong.
Hold on, to clarify, I think they said, no, they can have all the cakes they want. We're not writing on it for them. We're not going to design it, but they can buy a cake. There's a stack of them right there. Go buy one.
Okay.
Yeah. Look at it. Look at Eric knowing the law, the only non-lawyer here.
But I just don't want it to get. I just don't want it to bite us in the behind, because I'm not a free speech.
We're already so bit.
But I'm so
bit right now that that's what I'm saying. Let's stop smoking the delusionary weed and start recognizing what's actually happening in front of our very eyes and call it for what it is. Because the Solzhenitsyn said, the first thing you do is live not by lies. And right now we are so buried up to our eyeballs in lies. And that's why I want to recognize that the enemy of freedom is not just the federal government, but big tech, big business, big education, big, because they are actively colluding to thieve from the people, the wide swath of the individual. This country is founded on the individual. We have individual rights. We don't have corporate rights. We don't have government rights. We have individual rights. We don't have group rights. And that's
Steve, can I push back on that? I'm sorry. We have group rights.
Yeah.
Because we have the right to freedom of association. And you know what? My dollar is fairly weak. But if I take my dollar and your dollar and Sean's dollar, and we get together and we want to associate ourselves and spend more money to potentially make something happen in government, we have that right to do it. Just like a company, just like an association. So
Citizens
we do
United.
have associations.
Yeah, Citizens United, I think, said corporations are citizens.
Yeah, Citizens United.
Yeah. For that very reason.
The state could eliminate the corporate form legally, and we couldn't protest that. But they cannot prevent individuals from getting together and agreeing amongst themselves and meeting in a group and communicating amongst themselves. But the state, the corporation, is a creation of law, creation of the state.
That is true, yes.
So the power to destroy is the power to control. And so therefore to say that corporations have absolute individual power is false, because the state can destroy all corporations within its boundaries, but it could not, it would be improper under the Constitution to kill its citizens without due process of law, right?
Hey, Steve, I was just going to ask you a question, just so we kind of go back to the First Amendment situation. You're saying that obviously the government is actively colluding with social media to suppress, censor, get their message out. What are you proposing? I don't care if there's a law that's put in place that's federal. That will always happen. It happens with the higher ups. I think we get too. I'm super pessimistic. I've been doing social media law for a long time. I don't even view it as this way. I look at the platforms that we're on right now as ad platforms. What are we really doing? We're just giving content to social media platforms for them to make money on. Yes, we get an incidental benefit, which is hopefully that there are people that might say, oh, Ian's kind of cool. I'll maybe follow him. And then maybe I can monetize my audience, not AdSense, but other things, right? So sometimes I think we get so kind of focused on, I have a right to say something, that we somehow impute it onto some private platform. And I don't think
fair.
that's
fair, but that's why I think the utility route is the way to go. Because, for example, do you think that the Alphabet company has a de facto monopoly on advertising? I would probably say yes. The television and print media is dead. So where do the advertising dollars go? They go to Facebook, Google, the big five tech companies. So they effectively have a monopoly on advertising revenue. So I'm saying separate out the speech platform, the deliverer of the information, which means the pipelines for which we can communicate with each other, regulate them like a utility, like I can get my electricity. I pay my electricity bill and I'll pay my pipeline bill. That's the best. And I don't know if I have the almighty answer on this question. I would like your input on that. But I do think that the fact that there is a monopoly on this pipeline of information is a threat to individual freedom.
I think things. Could you say something, Nate? Sorry to interrupt.
No, I said usually the response to that is access to the internet doesn't mean that you have access to certain websites. And I think Facebook made the argument, the MySpace argument, that just because, MySpace was the big dog, they came along, and it's a trend, it's something that moves very frequently and that type of thing. So even though I believe you're right, they do have this monopoly on free speech, but on the opposite end, it's futile at best. And that's why they haven't checked Facebook. This is not like Standard Oil or AT&T. AT&T, to make a phone call, you had to use AT&T, right?
I'm going to push back. Hold on, Nate. No, that's not true, because the case they're putting against Google right now is literally saying that they are like Standard Oil because they're the platform and everybody has to be on there. They are de facto a monopoly. If you want to go buy a plane ticket, their products get shoved up the line, and they are I forget the term for it, but they're increasing their monopoly power by surfacing their own results. Amazon is also being looked
yeah,
at for this.
that's the case. That's the case. I think they're not making. That's not the argument against Google, against Facebook. That's the argument against Amazon. The search results and the bites and all that stuff.
And Google, yes. So I'm just saying.
Yeah, but not Facebook. But I would say, but I think we were talking about Facebook and monopoly piece. So, but in terms of that, I think unless you can make the argument that the only way you can get your message out is through Facebook, Facebook will say, well, what about Google? Google will say, what about this one? And then I think there's like 1,000 other search engines. Like one of the largest search engines in the world is a Chinese one, right? What about them? What about them? So I think
Baidu, I think, something like that.
Yeah, I think right now to make the argument that it's that they're a monopoly is just too early. It's just too early, and it's sad because I don't know how much market share they need to have. But right now, that's going to be the argument. There's other platforms that you can use. There's other advertising dollars you can use.
Well, I'm kind of hoping that the market itself works.
No, but here, let me push back on that idea. I know that's the prayer of all good conservatives, right? That somehow the market will correct. But one thing is the market is not perfect, and our lefty friends on the other side have a lot of valid criticisms about unregulated free markets. And one of those criticisms is it results in unemployment, there's structural unemployment, and natural monopoly. Monopoly is the natural consequence of gamesmanship over time by corporations competing for your dollars over time. It will result in natural monopoly. It's the purpose of federal antitrust law and state antitrust law, for that matter, to when somebody wins the game, to reshuffle the deck so that maximum efficiency and maximum freedom can be allowed, right? But that's not happening now. We have a failure.
I think we're going to have a disagreement on the natural monopoly and the definition.
Well, that's the whole game. In the 1920s, the game monopoly, the board game monopoly, was designed to demonstrate that very concept. That over time, the free markets result in individual monopoly.
But just as a factual matter, you have natural monopolies and you have unnatural monopolies. Natural monopolies are 100%.
As soon as you use that
natural monopolies should be utility.
But they're 100% legal. If I come up with the new
then
product,
regulate them like a utility.
But they generally aren't regulated. Natural monopolies are 100% legal, and it's okay. It's
Define what is a natural monopoly.
A natural monopoly is
Microsoft Windows.
That was a natural monopoly. They came up with a new product, and everybody wanted to use their new product, so they were the only person selling it. So they had a natural monopoly. Now, an unnatural monopoly.
Hold on, and then they took it and made it unnatural. So we used the same company, and they made it unnatural, and they said, "Hey, there's this Netscape thing coming out right now. We're going to use our market power, our natural monopoly, which is no problem." And we're going to put Internet Explorer inside the operating system and make them tied together to suppress the competitor. So you had a natural monopoly, no problem. But then as soon as they became monopolistic, or they did the gamesmanship, and that's my issue, Steve, is as soon as you said gamesmanship, now you're not talking about a natural monopoly, you're talking about a manipulation, in my opinion.
And in the current Facebook,
we're going after the baker, the person for not writing on the baker. That person's getting destroyed by our system. The individuals are getting destroyed in the system. But these institutions are just keep rolling around because it's, everybody's making money and let's just forget about it. But yet they are strangling individual freedom. I don't know. I made my point.
I agree with you about the individuals. This is why I'm saying there's so many different arguments. Like, I support the fact they're going after Google, and the FTC is okay. Maybe it's only the FTC, and maybe it's only that department, but somebody is doing it. So I think you really should call balls and strikes, right? I mean, okay, that is good. Good job. Thank you. This is bad. Do this. I don't think we're at a complete impasse. There are some things going on that I think do have value, and I don't think we should just throw the baby out with the bathwater.
I like Ian's intake because he does social media civil stuff in California, so that's sort of a unique perspective. You're not in flyover country, I see.
Before Ian's first video that I saw where he blew up was when YouTube got sued by the FTC for COPPA. If anybody hasn't watched that video, that was like the great. And I learned so much from that video. Do you remember that video? It was crazy.
I do. Way back when.
With Jacob Blake. Oh my God, that was such a great. For those of you who know, the YouTube got sued and got hit with like millions of dollars in fines. So Ian's video on that was like life changing.
Thank you very much, Nate. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, we can go on for a while on this. I just think that it's my opinion is I just see it from the creator side, and I really I don't get. I think that there's a collusion going on between big tech, big corporations, and the government. I don't think you get away from it. I actually think these antitrust lawsuits are all engineered. If I was, I don't know if you're seeing the AI stuff, but they keep going to the government saying, regulate me, daddy. And when they do that, you know what's happening. They want a declaratory judgment. You know what I'm saying? All us lawyers know about declaratory judgment, which is basically saying, listen, I want an establishment of a baseline in the law so that I am adjudged good. And so that's what it is. I don't think I think the Google and Facebook and all the different social media companies are handing out their evidence, their discovery, and saying, please, okay, we're a monopoly, whatever it is, we're making billions. And I think the other thing that they're doing right now, and I want to make sure, because I own a company now that does online legal document stuff, and we do Google SEO stuff. And I have to tell you that the monopoly on Google SEO stuff is slowly dissipating. You know why? Search
AI.
is down. And you know why search is down is because of large language models. So where we're transitioning now is less about, asking questions, how do I do a probate? How do I do a divorce on Google? And we're doing that more on I'm going to use the word quotes AI. It's not AI. And I think at some point in time that AI is going to transition into advertising, so that as my company, a People's Choice, is going to have to pay, OpenAI to be able to be one of the mentions in the AI search. So I do think all that's changing right now. And so as far as freedom of speech comes out, guys, I just think that we just have to take the cards that are dealt to us right now. It is no secret that an account with sub 10,000 subscribers, you're just not going to get the push that an account with 1 million subscribers. That's just the way the deck is. And then you also know that the people that have above 1 million subscribers are doing stuff that we don't know about, and they'll never reveal it. So that's the same type of case we have to take when it comes to our social media. So I don't get too down on it. I just kind of take it as the territory. I express myself the best way I can and hope for the best, understanding that my value is not tied up in social media platforms. My value is tied up in my words, my writing, the things I do, basically offline. So that's kind of where I come from it.
Southern law. I know that you have to have thoughts. You haven't said a word in 20 minutes, probably.
Yeah, I'm digesting all this, but it's all around the concept of free speech, right? And I think Steve talked earlier about just the being under attack from so many different angles. And Ian's right. There's always closed door meetings. There's always people with power that deal with things. And just like you could pass a law to make something a crime, that doesn't mean there's not going to be any crime. What disturbs me, though, is this Missouri case talking about what Steve's talking about is the openness with which the federal government began to attempt to guide or control who could talk, who couldn't talk, what topics were okay, which topics were not okay. Because, once the federal government starts to do something, it's very hard to stop it. Going from backroom, closed door, rich people getting together situations is different than starting to set up committees of bureaucrats straight out of undergraduate school with the latest things to be mad about, and having meetings and let's pick this person, let's don't let them talk anymore. And this happy conjunction between the federal government and media to deprive people of speech is different than a private platform controlling the tilt of how it does things or which words you're going to say, which that can be bad too. But I think the battlefield has moved past that to some degree, to the government trying to convince people that misinformation and malinformation are not under the First Amendment. So it's the proper place for the federal government to tell companies to help them pick out people who say miss or mal, which is correct information that they deem isn't being used for the right purpose, that they should pay people literally to work under the federal government, not, behind a closed door, but committees and things. They would take this much, and they will take it to places we can't imagine now in terms of control. And I think that will continue to happen. Like Ian says, you can't get yourself depressed about the world you're living in, right? It is what it is, but let's see what's going on here, which is the whole concept of a shared identity. Like somebody said 30 years ago, you could sit in a room with a liberal and a conservative and have a dialogue with each other. There are a lot of people now who don't want that. There can't be two sides of the story. It's violence to tell the other side of the story. I mean, we all heard it. It's violence if you tell me an opposing viewpoint. They shout down people on campuses, and enshrining that in federal bureaucracies, I find that pretty disturbing. That's what I think.
The other thing I'll point out is, when we talk about this ability to call balls and strikes, like Ian was talking about, I believe that these big tech companies were actually given the unfettered license to call balls and strikes under Section 230. Sure. Mm-hmm. So, and that really is a hard part of the problem. That should not necessarily be their call. That they should have blanket protection from being considered an editor or controller of the messaging that's coming out there, and yet be allowed to lean on the scales the way they can, and not have to have what naturally comes with it, which is that you are considered a publisher. You're considered a publisher rather than a distributor. So what I'm saying is this: it's fine if you want to tell me this is a private platform. They can do whatever they want. They can make their rules. They can do whatever they want. But big tech, because of Section 230, has now been granted a license that no one else in any other industry has, that license that they can maintain editorial control of the messaging, put out the messaging that they want, that they deem to be, to be holy or more important, and suppress that which they don't, without having any of the negative repercussions that other industries have when they exercise that type of control. And that's what I'm saying is these are these examples of where big tech is working outside of the rules because they've been granted a license by government to act outside the rules. That's why our rules that we've had in place for ages are not working to actually keep them in check.
But then how would that work for something like Christian Mingle or these other websites that also, because I think people have this notion that Section 230 only affects the big companies. It affects all of these websites. Like all of them have the same platform protection.
Part of the problem is Section 230 came about before social media. And I don't think it addressed what was coming. Yeah, it was CompuServe and Prodigy and bulletin boards online. Mm-hmm. Which is completely different. And the comment section on the New York Times, as an example, because people could, New York Times, anybody could put a comment on there, but that doesn't mean that they're a publisher of the comment, and they could take out like nasty. Right. They would write an article and then people would comment below. So this would be like the comment section below the article, but that's not social media. And I really feel that's part of the problem is the technology is leapt ahead too far for what was already written in law. It's the same way as what I think Ian was saying with Google is getting its lunch eaten right now because of AI, LLM, whatever you wish to call it, machine learning, because the whole point of Google was to make money selling ads. How did they get ads? Oh, you would be looking for something and they would pop ads on the screen.
But Eric,
with AI, they're literally just answering.
But Eric, doesn't that do this? Boom. But doesn't that cut against the argument of them being this monopoly? Because right now we're in one instance saying they're this huge monopoly, and in the other instance saying they're not. Their days are numbered because AI is removing them their market share.
Again, two things can be true at once.
That's what I'm saying. So two things can be true. Even though two things can be true at once, and essentially we're undercutting the argument that we're making that they're a monopoly, because now, as Ian said, and as seems like everyone agrees with, that monopoly is being shredded by AI, because AI is essentially a better form of search, right? It's a better form of search.
But I'm saying it's a race, okay? And that's what I was saying earlier, and people got cynical when I said, I'm hoping the market corrects itself. Sometimes the correction in the market is new technology that disrupts what the hell is going on. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying hopefully the market corrects itself. Like right now, Google is a monopoly. Sorry, it's true. They are. Now, they can be destroyed tomorrow from another technology. That doesn't mean that they're not a monopoly. Doesn't mean that they're not making bad, deceptive business moves, things like that.
Yeah. In other words, you're saying they're a monopoly, but whether they're a natural or unnatural monopoly is the argument. But one thing I do want to ask, I just read this article a couple of days ago, which I thought was fascinating. TikTok, one thing that they've been doing is that it's actually easier for someone who, if you open up a TikTok account right now and you put up a video, it's easier for you to go viral as a new account, because what they do is
Yep.
they'll take a new video and give you 5 million views and then get you addicted to
Yep.
that one big hit, and then you become like nothing. So what you do is you have so many now kids and everything creating new accounts and just putting up new videos. And I think it's supposed to be like your first 5 or 10 videos that is supposed to happen. And you get that one big hit and it addicts you mentally. So do you think, so people are now trying to sue TikTok saying that type of tactic is essentially making it extremely addictive and holding people to the platform. I find it fascinating because I think that type of deception, it should be illegal in some way. Even though I understand why they do it, it's just like, it's going, I think, a little far where you're artificially making something go viral to essentially make someone addicted to the platform.
Hey, good news. TikTok is losing relevance every day. I did not realize that.
Oh.
No, I mean, if you look at the numbers, like look at the top 10 most visited websites, TikTok was number 1 last year. They've dropped down to like 10 or lower. I'm not kidding. It's one of my favorite quotations of all time is Ernest Hemingway. How did you go bankrupt? Slowly at first, and then suddenly. So yes, TikTok is huge, it's big, everything else. But if you start looking at the actual numbers, TikTok has problems.
Well, hold on.
TikTok
is overtaking. TikTok is overtaking Facebook though.
But forget all that. Okay,
for kids though, right? So they're like literally number 2 platform for kids.
You're looking at trees. Let's look at the forest. You're right. That's a great quote about going bankrupt, slowly, and then all of a sudden. That's what's happening to our country and the dollar.
Yes.
Because we have twice the defense budget, twice the federal defense budget being spent every year on interest on the debt. And every little uptick of inflation is crushing this country. And so what's going to happen is our dollars will be devalued. And I will hearken back. There's a really good book about the German hyperinflation called When Money Dies. And a lot of, people look at the Nazis and they talk about World War I, but they forget about the German hyperinflation that stole every worker's in retirement, people like my age who are working for the government, who are promised a retirement and now cannot eat. They sell everything they have to the farmland and the urban because for an egg, and then they're out of stuff and there's no answers. So, and we are just running right off that cliff. Read When Money Dies, and you will get a real insight into what would the pathway that our country is. There's no political will on either side. Every time anybody would say, hey, we need to be careful. Oh, you mean you don't like little children and their school lunches? And so we are destined to go off that cliff. Now, I'm just throwing out ideas and answers, maybe in a book called Prepare.
Nice.
Nice.
Bring capitalism back into the conversation. And I'm going to give this to Steve. He sent this earlier because I think it kind of dovetails with what we're talking about. The censorship switchboard, a new layer to the Biden administration's Orwellian Ministry of Truth.
Well, and this to me is the point we're talking about. Like the battlefield continues to move, right? And the federal government creating an architecture to control the content of speech and to direct it and to suppress it in the, under the good intentions that, foreign countries or other countries, they're all foreign if they're not just, so other countries will try and manipulate it. So our government needs to get on top of it. They put that up there as that, that's the sign on the door. But once you come into the store, all they're selling is censorship of their own citizens for the most part, right? And that's what they want to do. They don't want to hear your viewpoint. They don't care about it. They don't like you. It's not about whether there's a group on top, which that's kind of the First Amendment. Like, if freedom of individuals, there shouldn't be a top, but it's which group is on top. And they have narrowed that range of people that they want on top to some of the most obnoxious people that I can imagine existing if you watch the news today. So not a federal government fan, I guess.
I'm not either. What I don't like is the lack of foresight, too. I always hearken back to the, quote, nuclear option. I believe they called it in like 2010 or whatever. They couldn't get a Supreme Court justice through. They were so pissed off about it. They're like, oh, you know what? We're just going to go with a straight up and down vote because they had the majority. Well, that's cost them like 3 justices that got through on an up and down vote. and I always worry, and I worry about both sides, if you will, trying to consolidate their power while they're in, because ultimately, yes, it's going to flip around, and we're going to have a scenario like right now. The Justice Department, everybody's being completely weaponized to go after the top competitor to the President of the United States. And well, okay, so now let's say Trump wins. Does that mean that everything's going to get weaponized to go against his top competitor? Because it can go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I feel like we've all lost the plot.
But why shouldn't he?
Why shouldn't who?
I shouldn't want.
If Trump regains power, why should he not weaponize everything against his enemies?
Because then we're no longer a country.
Yeah, because
then we're just
when the good starts doing evil,
right.
when the good starts doing evil, they become evil. They're no
Thank you.
longer good.
So are you saying that the other side is doing evil upon the?
Yes.
Yes, that's
well,
evil.
thank you, Nate. There's a little code.
No, I'm saying if that's evil. Yeah, I think weaponizing the criminal justice system against political opponents, you shouldn't do that. And I don't think the response to that should be doing it.
Joe of good logic is sitting in the courtroom and he's watching it unfold right in front of him.
Well, that's a civil trial, But I think like the New York, the original New York.
So when we take his money,
I think that one is.
And we exclude him from the ballot, we're going to destroy him and his family, prison all his lawyers. Who is exempt from this tyranny that we have created? There's no. You're saying, oh, it's just a civil. It's just that. It's just this one. It's just, enough. Just that. What about all the January 6 people? Who's standing up for any of them?
Nate,
Right?
it is technically a civil trial, but would you call all these states trying to get them off the ballot? That's technically a civil trial too. I mean, but the point is that it's designed to suppress, to basically keep them to suppress the will of the people. So it doesn't, just because it's civil, it doesn't make it in anything innocuous at all. And the relief they're seeking is that he should not be allowed to do business in the state of New York.
Yeah,
which would affect his ability to run almost certainly.
Well, I don't want to get. I think one thing is we can't just throw it too big of an umbrella and say everything is. So what I do is I like to look at each individual because it's contextualized. So for instance, like even with
Burn
this
it all down
window,
and make the bubble bounce.
So
and
I think
rebuild it from the ground
well,
up.
I think every single case is a little different, and I think number one, trying to get your political opponent off the ballot is nothing new. Just read Obama's book. He did it a couple of times. I think George W. Bush tried to do it. There's like a lot of politicians when they're running against the people and they'll find an efficiency. Hey, this person didn't get the signatures. Everyone tries to do it. And I think this is just one of those similar tactics. Now, I think maybe the reasons why they're trying to get them off, maybe people may object to, but this is nothing new. Politicians have been doing this for years. The second part, if we're talking about all the criminal trials, hold on. You're talking about all criminal trials. Well, no, he did. Obama got his political opponent thrown off the ballot and won the election because he didn't meet the qualifications. So, but again, we can argue with that, but it's been done before, and it's going to be done again after this because that's the nature of politics. I think also now with the civil trial, I'm just gonna say it. It seems this is not a trial about whether he's liable or not. This is a trial about how much money he's going to pay. And I think, just reading, I watched your stream, Joe, and I saw you struggle with it. And there was things in that stream where you even had to say like, hey, this is it just is what it is, because this is a documents case. This isn't even like you don't even need people to say, this is literally a documents case.
It's not exclusively a documents case because it's application of law in a way that is purposefully leaning in a particular direction. The entire point being that, with this Judge Engerum, who, obviously I believe he's a New York judge, so he's beyond reproach.
Joe hopes he doesn't appear before him.
Oh my God, you don't know how it is in New York. I don't forget, I was a DA in New York, and I had to go in front of these judges like every day. I've been called an idiot. I had get your supervisor. Like it's funny because I think when people really go into the courtroom and see sometimes how these state court judges are, they'd be shocked at the decorum. Sometimes it's really crazy. Like it's really crazy.
But the point I was making is the way that when he's writing his decision where he found him liable, and now this became a damages issue. in one page he's basically saying that there's absolutely no way to get a fair valuation on what property is worth, and then 5 pages later he basically says that Trump should be found guilty for putting an improper valuation on what a property is worth. He tied himself in not saying that Trump, while there's a disclaimer there, which Trump has been screaming about every time he gets in front of the press. He talks about how he, this started, all these documents which are purportedly improper or misassessing. They start with a page and a half, what he calls disclaimer, which basically it's not really technically a disclaimer. It's saying do not rely on these documents for their accuracy and do your own due diligence. So it's not really a disclaimer the way attorneys would use the phrase, but in the common vernacular, it's close enough to a disclaimer that he's saying it served as a disclaimer for other real estate people when they were getting loans from banks to say, look, don't yell at me. I specifically told them not to trust my numbers and that they should do their own due diligence. Well, this Judge Engoron, he says you can't have a disclaimer even if it's the particularly savvy business partner on the other side, which there's no one savvier than a bank, one would think. Even if it's a savvy one, you cannot have a disclaimer if there's information that you alone have access to, which is what you're tricking them about. So he's trying to use that as a basis to knock this out from being a disclaimer. So what is the nature of this information that Trump alone has access to that the bank could never find unless because Trump kept it so well hidden? Well, how many floors there are in a building? There's no way any bank could possibly figure out how many floors are. So if he puts down that there's 20 extra floors because he's talking about potential for a building, a floor and a building that has 76 floors, and he claims it has 110 or whatever it is, and it's like that's something that the bank could never possibly find out that he's the only person on the planet. When he comes up with a valuation number based on how he's doing it, there's no way for a bank to go into Zillow and figure out what that building is actually worth. When he talks about how many buildings are built onto a property, he's the only person on the planet who could figure it out. It's not like anyone flying a helicopter could just fly on over and figure it out. He alone has access, and because he alone has access, that's why this disclaimer doesn't work. When you talk about that type of interpretation of law in order to enact these policies that Judge Engoron certainly seems to support, and his wife has basically been tweeting out F Trump all over the place. So you tell me that when it's never applied to any other business people that way, is this really a documents case, or is this really a matter of saying that we're going to apply the law to most people this way, and we're going to individually apply it completely differently to this person who we dislike?
I'm going to tell you this is a documents case, and I believe you're trying to explain it in a way that's favorable. And I understand this is a very pro-Republican crowd here, but let's just be clear. This documents case is because of certified letters and certified writings that you have to submit to banks and to other lending institutions that are under New York state law. You're certifying that these are true and accurate, even with the disclaimer. And that was even mentioned. And for instance, one of the issues was the 33,000 feet, right? The 10,000 square foot versus 33,000 square foot. And then it wasn't only his regular. Then he had certified appraisers who are certified by the state to make these appraisals. They appraised it less. Then you had the tax assessors. They appraised it less, and he still appraised it for more. And then let's not also understand, too, there's different strokes for different folks. If you're at the billionaire level, the banks are going to be more reliant on your certification, your certifications by your accountants and the people that you say are good people who are taking an oath and filing documents by law that are supposed to be true and accurate, even with the disclaimer. And they're going to take that for face value. Now, the only issue I would see, even with this, is that no one was truly harmed in this case. All the banks got paid back. Every loan was paid on time. Everything, they did everything right when it comes to paying it back. But the state is saying that you submitted documents that you knew to be false. Even with this disclaimer, the law says that they should be right. And if you submit them to banks, you violated the law. Now, I understand that may be uncomfortable for a lot of people to understand, and maybe uncomfortable for a lot of people to, but just like you said, if you're living in a 10,000 foot apartment and you say it's 33,000 foot, no matter what disclaimer, and you submit it to the state as true and accurate, then unfortunately, you got an issue. And that's the issue that Trump has run into now.
You're talking about submitting to a state. It wasn't submitted to a state. It was submitted to a private entity.
It was submitted to the state. It was submitted to the state. No, it was submitted to the state for tax purposes. It was submitted to the private entity, the banks, and that was the original reason. They were like, well, hold on, you submitted these numbers to the state, these numbers to the bank, and now we've taken it all, comparing them all, and found that all of these numbers seem to be different.
But it's not. But it's not. The issue is not that they claim he lied to the state. It's that they're claiming that he willfully lied to the bank. So it's not about. It's the numbers he submitted to the state are what's being used as evidence that he was intentionally trying to mislead them. But it's not a matter of that he's lying to the state. They're like, the state's like, oh, he was telling us the truth, but he was fraudulent in the way he dealt with this other private entity. So that's why when you say something like, well, banks are going to trust a billionaire more, how is that relevant? Why would, just because they decide to trust him more because he's rich or because he's Donald Trump or because they like the style of his hair? That doesn't matter. The fact is that doesn't change how we're going to apply the law as far as two private individuals.
Just to be clear, if you fill out a credit card, like most people don't know, if you fill out a credit card form, some people like to put a little extra value to their income. That's a federal crime, right? People get charged with these crimes all the time. Filling out the forms for defrauding banks and those type of things.
I've never seen that. Have you ever represented somebody?
You've never seen somebody who filled out bank and I'll pull up a couple of cases right now.
For that? Who gets prosecuted for that?
Yeah, you do get prosecuted if you fill out mortgages and stuff in the forms and you falsify the information on them. You do get prosecuted for that.
I prosecuted one case with a contractor, but there was a loss. The contractor filled out a false affidavit to collect money from somebody, and they stole $80,000 from somebody by filling out the false affidavit. We prosecuted that person, all right? Here, there's no injury, there's no damage, there's no complainant. The only reason that this case is being brought is because it's Donald Trump, and they decided to go through every possible document they could find to find something, and then they disagree with valuations because they're the government and they know about real estate values. I've been to Mar-a-Lago. Let me tell you, it's not worth $18 million. It's probably worth $500 million. It's the most exclusive, the largest, the most exclusive private residence in the most exclusive zip code in the whole United States. And to say that's worth $18 million, that shows you the fraud that the court is perpetrating on us.
Well, that's where I think, even in your rendition, you've made a critical error. In the Mar-a-Lago case, if you read the court documents, there's a stipulation for Mar-a-Lago that it can't be used as a residence. So just as you said, the residence. Hold on. Let me finish. In the court case, if you read the opinion, there's a stipulation that Mar-a-Lago cannot be used as a residence, and that was the reason why it was assessed at lower taxes. And the reason why it could not be used. Hold on. The reason why it could not be used as a residence is because of that stipulation. So when you are trying to sell it, the court said that, hey, if you're trying to sell it, it still carries that stipulation, and that's why it couldn't be valued at the higher thing. So Mar-a-Lago can't be used as a residence.
One of the most brilliant things when I saw Trump testify on Monday, one of the most brilliant things I heard him say was something that the AG seemed to completely miss. It was genius that Trump expressed, and I mentioned how Dave Chappelle, when he expressed admiration for Trump and in a sense, even though I don't think he likes him as a president or as a person, but he expressed admiration that out of all the politicians that we all thought they're cheating, we thought all these rich people are cheating, and Trump came out and said, we are cheating. I know this because I'm cheating too, and now I'm going to go back in that house and cheat. And he pointed to like an exchange where Hillary was yelling at him that he doesn't pay enough taxes. He's paying enough taxes, and he said that I rely on the laws that you wrote for your rich donors. That's what I do, and that's why I don't. You're right. I don't pay much in taxes. So why is it that it's listed as a club? Because, and this is the key issue here, in this district, clubs are zoned differently for tax purposes. If you express an intent to keep it as a club forever, if you express that intent, that's what you plan on doing. In that case, you get a much, much, much lower tax rate. But the value of the property is considered much, 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 much lower as well. So that's why they're saying, oh, you were trying to play this at both ends of the game, at both ends of the table. When it came to taxes, you expressed that intent that you're going to keep it as that forever. But then when you're evaluating the house, you're not valuing it as a club, you're evaluating it as a private residence, which is worth much, much more. And what he expressed, he kept saying, first of all, it's an intent. I expressed an intent. Just because I expressed an intent at that time doesn't mean it must always be that. But the other thing that he said, which was so cool, is he said, is at one point, he just threw out offhandedly, he goes, the best type of club is a club that has only one member. And this is how he displayed his genius as a real estate. You can hate him whatever you want, but his brilliance that he came up with, which is he figured out how to use those rules in a way that best protected him and probably makes the property more valuable. Because what he did basically, he said, I'm going to pay less. Anyone who owns this property is paying much less in property taxes. And since it's a club, you can decide that this club has only one member to it, and therefore you're gonna have this big fat property. You're paying much less in property taxes than all your neighbors who have smaller properties. It makes it more valuable. So what he did here was what I think was genius, was that he figured out what the rules were. He found that loophole, and he leaned so hard into it, and that's why it is a property that's worth a lot more than what a club is. And in fact, it's arguably worth more than those other private residences because they are paying less in property taxes. It was genius. It was genius what he did.
I'm sorry.
In Florida, it happens every. You go down the road and you see houses, you see housing developments all laid out, and you've got this big piece of property here, and there's a cow grazing on the land, right? And it's like, oh, it's agricultural. Same thing.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it says here, defendants further imply that they may ignore the plain language of the deed restriction. So again, like you guys are saying, yeah, you can just ignore the plain language of the deed restriction. Again, I'm reading from the opinion. And because they would likely be able to, the evil judge. But I'm just reading it. Just read it, right? 2002 deed restriction, because they would likely be able to use the Florida judicial system to get out of their contractual requirements. So again, I understand making up like great excuses, but this is not even what they argued in court. They argued that, hey, even though we know the deed restricts us from doing this, well, we believe we can just violate it and get out of this contractual agreement when we want to sue it. So listen, guys.
Vacant land.
I understand stressing this a little bit, but at least let's bring up arguments they used in court. Let's bring up what they brought in front of the judge and just not just try to forgaze it. You know what I'm saying?
I don't think we're going to solve this one here. I know that
I don't, but I do
get a hard deadline. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, sorry. I do agree with Nate. Ultimately, we kind of got to stick with what's been there. I mean, that's kind of what we're limited to here, as far as trying to.
Oh, this is just the language.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like violate the deed restriction. Come on, guys, really? Like, are we really at that point?
All right. Well, on that happy note, because I know that we have got a tight deadline, and I've got to go ship something, or I'm going to be in deep trouble. Where can everybody find you? Steve, Southern Law, the chatty one.
Southern Law. We didn't get to it, but if you want to hear more about it tonight, I'm going to go over the Richard Allen case and the judge in the hot seat. I'll be on the defense side on this one. Yeah, because it's what's going on up there is very screwed up. So if you really want to see a setup for how a judge can get busted, this is it. And then tomorrow morning we'll go over what the hell has happened in all these cases this week.
You got to go to Southern Law's channel. It's amazing stuff. I've been sneaking and watching him like in the background. I got to send you something, but no, it's great stuff, guys.
Definitely. Steve Gosney, when you're not writing 26 new books, what do you have going?
Well, you can get my newest book, which is called Brucey the One-Eyed Wonder Dog, for your Christmas, all your Christmas gift needs to any child within your circle.
It's and for Hanukkah.
It's what?
And for Hanukkah. And for Hanukkah.
And for Hanukkah. Well, I have the Joe of Good Logic Orthodox Jew seal of approval?
I've got to finish reading through it. I apologize.
Okay, it's not that long a book. It's
a
children's book.
You can't get through children's books.
Brucey's a mensch, says Joe Neerman.
I want to say it's a Judeo-Christian story, but
can I manage to get like some recommendation in the book if I actually do it? Like if I say something like Brucey is a
it's already at the printer, buddy. The ship has sailed. You're like a freaking Ricada trying to get him to write my forward. I got a pound on it. So no. Brucey the One-Eyed Wonder Dog. I love you, Joe, and you're my buddy. You're my Jewish representative.
Hey, Steve, you got to tell us where we can get the book at, because I want to buy one for the kids.
SteveGosney.com, only from me, not from a monopoly of Amazon or Barnes and Noble or anybody else. Only available for me, because for every one Brucey book that you buy from me, I would have to give Amazon 16 books. So I'm not doing that. I am my own man, and it's only I practice what I preach. So I want you to have Brucey in your home, not only for this Christmas or Hanukkah, but for every coming Christmas and Hanukkah and your future generation. Because I built this book, I designed it so that you can read it to your child, learn paragraphs, get to know Brucey, and put it in your collection for all the children to read. And we can all hold hands and sing Kumbaya, and the world will sunset in peace.
All right, Sean, follow that.
Where's your children's book?
My children's book would not be very children appropriate. So you guys can find me at Potentially Criminal. We do try sometimes, depending on what happens, we might do a live during the week, but generally always do the live show every Thursday night at 9:30 Eastern time, God's time zone, the best time zone.
God's time zone.
It is. It's the best, not like Mountain Time or Central Time.
Okay. Nate.
It's the best time zone. It's better than any other time zone.
Nate the lawyer, I know I'm the person the chat always hates, but I still love you guys anyway. Still have the videos my videos are doing amazing. We had a video go over 1 million last month. We have another one about 500,000 this month. But we have a crazy case coming up where an NFL player was accused of blankety blank against a young woman, and he lost his career. They canceled him from the league. But a year later, come to find out, the woman who accused him of the blankety blank, he wasn't even at the place. He wasn't even there. He lost his career, and he was not even allowed to even come back in the NFL. So he's now suing her. He's suing the NFL. He's suing everybody, trying to get his career back. Now, this is on top of the other story that we had just done with Trevor Bauer, where the same thing happened, where the woman had admitted that she wanted to sleep with him and said about the blankety blank so she can get his money. So now we have an NFL player who has the same exact thing. So we're going to be covering that case, and it's insane. It's a punter for the Bills if anybody wants to look it up.
Yes, the garden implements of a questionable chasteness are somewhat upset.
Oh yeah, and also one other thing too. In Chicago, the people in Chicago want to get rid of the sanctuary city status, so that they wanted to vote it out. But one of the councilwomen who wants to keep Chicago a sanctuary city threatened to say that she was sexually assaulted by another congressman if he didn't vote to keep sanctuary city status in place. So we're also being covering that too, which is insane. And actually the city council people are assaulting each other over this issue. So we're going to be covering that too. Nice. But those are some of the interesting stories that we look into.
You know what? I hope they all win. Dave, what do you have coming up?
Yeah, so I'm going to do a follow-up stream for the last day so far of the Caitlin Armstrong trial. That's a love triangle out of Texas. Valhalla Awaits and myself have been streaming that all week. We have 2 people in the courtroom taking notes, making observations, taking notes of the testimony, and giving it to us, since that's not being televised as originally promised. And then I have a stream coming up regarding Turtle Boy. That's the YouTuber blogger that's been following the Karen Reed case that was charged criminally with intimidating witnesses. Also, protesters that have been protesting the Karen Reed case have now been threatened with criminal charges for intimidating witnesses for standing out on the street with protest signs. So we're going to be talking about that this week. So check it out. MLS Making Law Simple.
All right. Let me see. Ian.
Thank you so much, Eric. So you can just find me on YouTube at Ian Corzine. I got 2 channels. One is about social media law. The other is about decoding basically trending events. A lot of times these trending events can be traced to a law. And so I talk about that. Also on Instagram, and I know you guys are not big believers, but I'm a big believer in TikTok. So also on TikTok too, and X. So at Ian Corzine.
No, he's tearing it up on there. And by the way, 2 Rumble rants came in that I completely missed. So I want to definitely acknowledge those. Doug said, great panel, great discussion. Even Joe. No, she said, thanks, guys. Hi, Joe. Sorry I missed last night. LOL. And it's Doug. And Lost Core 23 said, might disagree, but love you, Nate. It's short. Just say Nate is wrong.
You know, you guys would miss me if I don't show up. These people say they hate me, but they would miss me if I wasn't here. So
They love seeing their two dads, Joe and Nate, talk.
No, you know,
Yes.
you know why this is so popular? Because this is probably one of the few places where you can get differing opinions, and we're not calling each other racist and sexist, and we just, we argue and then we love each other. So that's the way it is.
Respect for each other is essential to dialogue. Speaking the truth, and we all are trying to find the truth. We're trying to educate and learn from each other and get the best out of each other. And I do appreciate that about this panel.
Thank you. Definitely. And Trump trial, good logic. You've got another channel, I hear. I didn't know if that was real or if you're
That is real.
kidding. Okay.
It's real. No, I actually started a second channel.
So you're halfway to me.
Halfway there. Yeah. And so if you're Trump trial is my new project, and it's going to be, I plan on fixating there. That's me content which is exclusively fixating on any trials litigation that's related in any way to Donald Trump, which I think right now, by my reckoning, there's like 13 cases that are ongoing, which relate to Donald Trump and his candidacy, and or suing him civilly or trying to keep him off the ballot. And there's probably going to be that many more over the next 12 months. And I was like, you know what? I want to have a channel that's completely dedicated to that. I also figured that like a lot of people who may not know me probably will go into YouTube and just search up Trump trial, because there's always going to be some trial that's happening with him over the next 12 months at least. And I also plan on covering it and using it for election 24 coverage as well. So I urge you guys to check it out. I put a link down in the chat at some point here, but if you can all sign up to that. That is my newest thing now. Is I'm all about Trump and this election that we're less than 12 months away from. So.
I think that's a good idea, and you may see it take off and pass your first channel, because it sounds very, very niche down, specialized, very tight area. And that's also the kind of thing that you will get known as the Trump trial expert, possibly, and then get invited to talk on Megyn Kelly and all these other places because you're doing the Trump trial thing. So it's
where do you
clever.
find that again? Because I did subscribe, but so people know and they can find that show, because I think it's a great idea.
I just put it in the chat. I just dropped it there right now, so you can. But it's just at Trump trial. That's actually the. That's the name of it. I was thinking about calling it Trump trials, but I was like, no, I think people will Google it when they go into YouTube. They're just, if there's a trial that's going on, they're going to be looking for that trial. And this way, hopefully, they'll just.
But what do you think the solution is? I mean, for Trump, if you're going to advise Trump about how to get out of all these problems, I mean, what would you say?
As far as advising him, I think he's doing primarily what he has to do. I mean, he's doing what he has to do. I don't think there's going to be a question about him ending up on the ballot. All these efforts to keep him off the ballot, I think the same thing will happen to them that will happen to the much, if not all, of these criminal charges. Which is at some point, I think that the Supreme Court, which is divided into three different wings. There's three different branches of the Supreme Court. There's the left wing, which is Ketanji Brown Jackson, and it's Kagan and Sotomayor, and they're always going to basically come up with conclusions. Yeah, there's no content there yet. Don't tell them.
Okay, folks. Well, hold on. There's 927 people watching. There's 746 subscribers. Mm-hmm. We can get Joe to 1,000.
Get him up to 1,000. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my goal. Is I'm hoping I can get basically my 1,000 subscriber limit.
There's 757. It's my area code.
And
Come
you
on.
can get all the watch hours again.
So thank you so much. I really appreciate you pimping it. I think that the Supreme Court is broken up into those three branches. You have the left, you have the right, which is Thomas and Alito and mostly Gorsuch, and then you have the neocons in the middle. And the people what the neocon perspective is, our role of the Supreme Court is to keep America, the institutions of America, strong, and to stand up for them. And that's why they'll sometimes not come back with a conservative or more MAGA type of perspective. They'll come back with, something like, oh, well, we have to trust the government when they pass laws about X, Y, and Z. And even if it's bending the Constitution like they did in 2021, when all these different health issues came up, and there were laws about that. So they basically would ignore it. Why? Because they're saying we need to keep our institutions strong. So that's essentially, those are the three branches. That's Coney Barrett, that's Kavanaugh, that's Roberts. And I think that they are going to come to recognize that, even though I don't believe that they personally like Trump, even though two of them were appointed by him, they don't like him. I think they're going to recognize that if we allow any prosecutor anywhere in the country to go after a former president and bring charges and go after them, we are going to see this over and over and over and over again for the rest of America's history with every president. And I think they're going to create a yardstick and say, you cannot criminally charge a president for their conduct that while they're sitting in office unless they have been both impeached and convicted by the Senate. And I think that simple yardstick, that they put that down, it knocks out almost everything, that with all respect to all these criminal charges. And the logic behind it is this: it makes it much less of a political process, which is the whole fear when you have these criminal charges. What you have basically is, like, you have half the people can't stand the guy, half people can't stand Trump, half people can't stand Biden. It's different half of the country, but that's what we have going on here. Well, they don't want to see that Biden's going to go after, or whoever succeeds Biden, whether is going to be charged. So the way you cut that down is you say, if the Senate is willing to convict, and we'll trust the Senate, even though most of us would say otherwise, but a neocon who believes in institutions says, I trust the Senate, that if Trump really got out of hand on January 6th, let's imagine this scenario. Imagine to support that notion that you can trust the Senate. Imagine if on January 6th, instead of conducting himself what he did, Trump took it 30 yards further than that and actually led the charge there while he's carrying automatic machine guns, and he's